Chapter 7 The Time Trap. Light comes as they hang 1,000 feet above the black, sullen waters of a sea that stretches to the horizon. There is no sign of land. In a black, star-studded sky looms a globe of dull silver, incredibly vast. Its diameter covers fully a third of the heavens. Mason says, uncomprehendingly, "The moon, but it's close, Murdoch, very close. How far in the future have we come?" Murdoch's face is white. He eyes the instruments, reaches out a tentative hand, and withdraws it. Hesitating, he says, "Something is wrong. I do not know." "Wrong?" The Cimmerian growls an oath. "You said you'd mastered this hell chariot." I thought I had, but it is abstruse. Greta Klon comes from a more advanced world than mine." "We're not," Mason feels oddly cold as he asks the question, "we're not marooned here, are we?" Murdoch's lips tighten. He grips a lever, swings it over. His slim fingers dance over the control panel. Nothing happens. "For a while, at least," he says at last. "I cannot send the machine into time, but soon I can discover what's wrong, or at least I think so." Eliza smiles, though her eyes are frightened golden pools. "Then do your best, Murdoch. The sooner you succeed, the sooner we'll find the master." "No, no," Murdoch tells her impatiently. "We'll find Greta Klon in a certain time sector. Whether we start now or in an hour or 50 years will make no difference." 50 years? Eric's vulturine face is worried. "And in the meantime, what will we live on? What will we eat?" 10 hours later, the question reoccurs. Both Murdoch and Mason are haggard and red-eyed from their calculations and their study of the time ship's principles. The former says at last, "How long will this take? I don't know. We'd better find food. Too bad we didn't take any with us." "Where?" the Cimmerian asks. He glances around expressively at the bleak, lonely expanse of sea and moon-filled sky. "I think Ran, the goddess of the Northmen, has claimed the world for her own. The ocean goddess." "There'll be land," Mason says rather hopelessly as Murdoch sends the ship lancing through the air. "If we go far enough." But it is no long distance to the shore, a flat, barren plain of grayish sandy soil, eroded to a horizontal monotony by the unceasing action of wind and wave. No mountains are visible, only the depressingly drab land stretching away to a dark horizon, and there is no life, no animals, no vegetation. A chill emptiness seems to have no end. The dreadful loneliness of it makes Mason shudder a little. "Is this the end?" he whispers softly. "The end of all Earth?" Sensing his mood, though not comprehending the reason for it, Eliza comes close, gripping his arm with slim fingers. "We'll find food," she says, "somewhere." "We don't need to worry about water anyway," he grunts. "It's easy to distill that, and there's—" "Heh!" Eric shouts, pointing, his pale eyes ablaze. "Men, see? There." Below them, a little to the left of the drifting ship, a great jagged crack looms in the plain. There is movement around it, life, vague figures that are busy in the unchanging silvery twilight of a dying earth. "Men," Murdoch whispers. "No." Nor were they men. As the ship slants down, Mason is able to make out the form of strange creatures. Vaguely anthropoid in outline, there is something curiously alien about these people of a dying world. "Shall we land?" Murdoch asks. Mason nods. "Might as well. If they show signs of fight, we can get away in a hurry." The craft grounds with scarcely a jar near the great crack in the ground. Confusion is evident among the creatures. They retreat in hurried confusion, and then a group of 4 advance slowly. Through the transparent walls, Mason scrutinizes them with interest. They are perhaps 8 feet tall, with a tangle of tentacles that propel them swiftly forward. Other tentacles swing from the thick, bulging trunk. The head is small, round, and without features, a smooth knob covered with glistening scales. The bodies are covered with pale pinkish skin and do not resemble human flesh. Murdoch says, "They are plants." "Plant men, amazing people of this lost time sector. Yet evolution seeks to perfect all forms of life, to adapt it perfectly to its environment. In earlier days, trees had no need to move from their places, Mason knows, for their food is constantly supplied from the ground itself. With the passing of slow eons, perhaps that food has been depleted. Limbs and branches have stretched out slowly, gropingly, hungrily. Painfully, a tree has uprooted itself. The mutant has given life to others, and now, free of age-old shackles, Mason sees the plant man and fights down his unreasoning horror at the sight. Murdoch says, "Listen, I think they're speaking to us." "Speaking?" "With their minds. They've developed telepathy. Don't you feel some sort of message?" "I do," Elisa breaks in. "They're curious. They want to know who we are." Mason nods. "I don't think they're dangerous." He opens the port, steps out into the thin, icy air. A cold wind chills him. Among the plant men, a little wave of panic comes. They shrink back. Mason lifts his hand, palm outward, in the immemorial gesture of peace. Within his mind, a wordless message stirs. "Who are you? You are not of the deathless ones." At a loss, Mason answers aloud. "We are friends. We seek food." Again, the strange fear shakes the creatures. They draw back farther. One stands his ground, blind, glistening head turns towards the man, tentacles dangling limply. "Food? What sort of food?" They understand Mason's thoughts, apparently, conscious that he is on dangerous ground. He says, "Anything you can spare. What you eat." "Who are you?" "We come from the past," Mason answers at a venture. Will they understand that? "You are not deathless ones?" "No." Mason sensed that the deathless ones, whoever they are enemies of the plant men, and his reply seems to reassure the creatures. They confer, and again their spokesman stands forward. "We will give you food, what we can spare. We are the Gorchin." So Mason translates the plant men's thought message. There is more confidence in the creature's mind now, he senses. "You must hurry, however. Soon the wave will come." Puzzled, Mason nods agreeably. "Bring what food you can spare, then." "You must come with us. We may not carry food to the surface." Mason considers, glancing back at the ship. "How far must I go?" "Not far." "Well, wait a minute." He goes back to the others and explains what has happened. Murdoch shakes his head. "I don't like it." "They seem harmless enough. I'm not afraid of them. It's probably the other way around. They'll be glad to see the last of us. They're in deadly fear of some creatures they call the Deathless Ones, and they think we're related to them somehow." "Well," Murdoch rubs his lean jaw, "if you're not back soon, we'll come after you." With a smile for Eliza, Mason leaps out through the port and approaches the Gorchin. "I'm ready," he tells them. "Let's get started." Keeping a safe distance from the man, the plant creatures lead him to the edge of the great earth crack. A sloping ladder leads down into the depths. Several of them begin to descend it swiftly, and more gingerly Mason follows. It grows darker. 100 feet down, the ravine narrows to a silt-covered floor in which Mason's feet sink. The Gorchin lead him towards a round metal disc 10 feet in diameter that protrudes from the ground. One of them fumbles at the disc with its pinkish tentacles. Silently, metal slides aside, revealing a dim-lit hollow beneath. Another ladder leads down. At its bottom, Mason finds himself in a sloping corridor cut out of rock, leading into hazy distances. Plant men urge him along this. "How far?" Mason asks again. "Soon now." But it is fully half an hour later when the Gorchin halt before a gleaming door at the end of the passage. It opens, and beyond it Mason sees a vast and shining cavern, hot with moist warmth. A musky, strong odor blows dankly in his face. "We feed here," one of the Gorchin tells Mason. "See?" At a little distance is ranged a long row of flat, shallow basins let into the stone floor. Intense heat blazes down upon them. Within the basins is a black, scummed, oily liquid. As Mason watches a plant man march forward on his tentacles and lowers himself into a tank, he remains there unmoving. "The rays from the great lamps overhead give us strength," a Gorchin tells Mason with its thought message. "Within the pits we have food created artificially and dug out of the mines, dissolved in a liquor that aids the transmutation to chlorophyll." The arrangement is logical enough, Mason realizes. Plant food absorbed through the roots, radiation from the huge lights in the cavern's roof, a substitute for solar radiation, waning with the inevitable cooling of the solar system. But such food is useless for human beings. Mason says so. One of the Gorchin touches his arm with a soft tentacle tip. "It does not matter." "What?" A chill premonition shakes Mason. He glances around swiftly at the blankly shining heads of the plant men. "What do you mean?" You are to be used in our experiments, that is all. Like hell, Mason snarls and strikes. His fist crashes out, pulping the body of one of the Gorchin. Its flesh is horribly soft and fungoid. Moist soil clings to Mason's hand. The Gorchin, a gaping hole in its torso, halts and then comes forward again, apparently uninjured, and the others press toward the man, tentacles waving. The battle is brief. Mason's muscles are toughened with fury and desperation, but he has no chance against overwhelming numbers. So at last he goes down, with bound tightly, still struggling, flexible metal ropes. Then the plant men retreat, and Mason sees something that makes his throat dry with horror. A group of Gorchin are carrying a figure into the cavern, the body of Eliza, bound and silent, bronze hair hanging in disheveled ringlets about her pale face. She sees Mason. Kent, they attacked us after you left. They killed Eric, I think. Are you all right? Mason asks, trying to regain his breath. You're not hurt? She shakes her head. No, but Murdoch escaped into the ship. The Gorchin wait silently. Murdoch escaped? A little flare of hope mounts within Mason. Eliza seems to read his thoughts. He can't help. We're under the ocean. These demons took me underground just as a great wave came out of the east. Now Mason realizes why the plant men dwell underground. The moon's nearness causes giant tides that sweep resistlessly over the surface of the planet. Now they are far beneath the sea, and will be until the tide retreats. Mason grimaces. He tugs unavailingly at his bonds. One of the Gorchin comes forward. His thought message is clear. We bear you no hatred. You say you are not of the Deathless Ones, our enemies, yet you are very like them. For ages we have tried to find a way of defeating the Deathless Ones, and never yet have we succeeded. They cannot be captured. We cannot experiment on them. But you, if we find how you are vulnerable, we may use that knowledge on the Deathless Ones. Certain things we already know. Steel is useless. So are poisonous gases. But there are certain combinations of rays. The creature falls silent. His tentacles gesture, and the two captives are lifted, borne towards a glass block that towers nearby. A door is opened in its side. Mason is thrust into its hollow interior. Cursing, he struggles with his bonds as the plant men retreat with Eliza. Rolling over on his side, he peers through the transparent walls and watches. He goes cold with horror. To the Gorchin, the two humans are guinea pigs, valuable only as material for their experiments. They drag Eliza to an altar-like block of stone. Vainly she fights. The tentacles of the monsters reach out, deftly removing the girl's clothing. In a moment she lays utterly nude, chained to a stone block so that she can scarcely move. A Gorchin wheels a lens into position. From it a pale ray beam fingers out, enveloping Eliza's ivory body in lambent moonglow. She is unconscious, or seems so. For a second the ray is visible, then it snaps out. Working hurriedly, the plant men unbind the girl, carry her to Mason's prison, and thrust her within. They remain in little knots outside the glass walls, their blankly glistening heads inclined forward as they stare attentively at the result of the experiment. Cursing, Mason struggles to free himself. Useless attempt. The unyielding metal merely chafes and cuts his wrists. Presently he stops to glance at the girl. She is regaining consciousness. She moans, lifts a slim hand to brush bronze hair from her face. Slowly she opens her eyes. In them is a blinding, dreadful staring that makes Mason catch his breath, his throat dry. The girl drags herself to her hands and knees. Her gaze moves questingly about the prison. She sees Mason. Silently she creeps forward. An angry flush is mounting in her face and bosom, and the glaring eyes grow wider. Eliza, Mason calls. Eliza. No answer. The girl crawls towards him and stops. She rises. Her breath rises and falls. A harsh cry comes from her lips. She suddenly springs on him. Mason is caught unawares. He feels soft flesh pressed against his face, fever hot. Catches a glimpse of Eliza's flashing teeth bared in a snarl. What madness had the Gorchin hellish ray worked on her? Mason rolls away just in time as Eliza's teeth drive at his throat. Fingernails rake his face. Then Eliza leaps again, eyes blazing. God Almighty, Mason groans. Would he have to kill Eliza to escape being murdered? He drives the thought from his mind. He knows that he can never harm the girl, even if she were insane. Yet for her own sake he must subdue her somehow, and he has little chance of doing that, bound as he is. "Eliza!" he calls again. The girl does not heed. Her body glistens with perspiration. She flings herself on Mason, fingers clawing, teeth seeking his throat. He tries to roll over, but cannot. A sharp pain lances through his neck. He feels the warm stickiness of blood trickling across his skin. Agonizingly, the girl's teeth drive deeper. End of chapter 7.